Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about this supposed early dispersal out of Africa of Homo erectus, or perhaps even Homo habilis. They're not even sure. But I thought this was a pretty interesting article just to talk about and speculate what happened about 500 or 400,000 years before the supposed out of Africa date. There's a lot of vagary when talking about this because there are a bunch of different stone tool sites that are a lot older than the established bones, the established dated bones of the earliest hominins to leave Africa, and the dates range between 1.8 to 1.9 years ago. And then there's some stuff out of China, like out of the Loess Plateau in China. Supposedly there's Homo erectus bones found that date around 2.15 million years ago, but a lot of archaeologists don't accept that date, just because they think it might be fabricated, or they just don't think it's authentic. And there's some other bones in China as well that are supposedly Homo erectus that date like over 2 million years ago. And then there's another hominin that they found in Georgia in the Caucasus Mountains. That's about 1.9 million. All of these bones are, again, up in the air. Sometimes they think they might not even be Homo erectus. They might be Homo agaster, who's a slightly older version of Homo erectus. Some think it's Homo habilis. So again, there's a lot of vagueness involved when talking about this. But what you can say for certain when you have these conversations and when you discuss this topic is that there were definitely humans making tools upwards of 2.5 million years ago. That's for sure. They just don't know which one it was. So that alone, for me anyway, is compelling enough to talk about and be taken seriously. So anyway, a new finding suggests hominins left the African continent about 500,000 years earlier than previously thought, and all of this centers around the Zarqa Valley in northern Jordan, which, if you're familiar with the area, you guys can see this. This is a Dead Sea, but along the Dead Sea here, this is called the Jordan River, and Zarqa Valley is home to the Zarqa River, which is a tributary of the Jordan River. So if you zoom in a little bit here, this is a Zarqa River Valley, and it just flows eastward into eastern Jordan. And here's some pictures of it. It's a very beautiful place, but also the home of this archaeological site that's home to tools and some bones and not bones. These obvious old that were carved by humans. Now, some of the evidence is quibbled. Some say that they're just completely natural and it's a result of just natural erosion. But I'll show you guys pictures later and you guys can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, and here's just a better map, a better key to this region here. So you see the Jordan River on the top left, and that's the Mediterranean up here, the Levant. And then down here is the bottom right is the actually zoomed in portion of the Zarqa River watershed, which again goes through. There's King Abdullah Canal, and then there's a dam here, but for the most part the Zarqa River Valley is still there as it was millions of years ago. So they found this large cache of chipped rocks, right? And these are the tools that they think were fashioned by whatever human was there. And we'll get into which species of human that is, or that was, later on. So Scardia, who's I think he's Brazilian. Yeah, he's the Brazilian scientist, and his colleagues are part of this international team that's been looking through here for a while. They believe that these are rudimentary tools used by early humans, crafted and discarded around 2.5 million years ago. So again, this is a really, really, really old date for stone tool making humans. So again, if they are right, we need to rethink which hominin species made the first forays out into the African cradle. And if you guys have read one of the books I recommended a while ago, it was a comment that asked me, was Sapiens by Yuval Harari. In that book, he talks about how there was a failed attempt to leave Africa, and then humans left Africa after that. So that the specific instance he was talking about was a lot earlier than what the dates are here, but that idea could be carried over in this scenario, just because it's pretty obvious that if we, where's the world map here? It's pretty obvious that people have been trying to leave Africa through the Levant, basically the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, a few times. Once they were thwarted, and then another time they made it a few 100,000 years later. But who's to say those were the only 2 times? It might have happened before then. And even in Algeria, they found I think a 2.4 million year old site that also features similar tools. So maybe they were dispersing. Let me zoom out further. Maybe they went north. And again, the Sahara wasn't the Sahara back then. It was a lot more habitable. So these people probably went north and then either went east or west, and they made it to Morocco and Algeria and such, and then they crossed through the Sinai into the eastern Mediterranean region. Either way, it's the pattern here is, just forget about the dates, is that people were moving out of Africa and into other regions for a while, and it seems like it was not a cyclical thing, but it seems like there are different waves of it happening, and that makes perfect sense if you think about what humans are capable of, and if they had if they were as intelligent, or even a fraction, not a fraction, but if they had moderate intelligence, they would have natural curiosity to just leave and look for better lands. And that makes total sense to me that they would do that millions of years ago. I don't see why that is only exclusive to Homo sapiens, that type of curiosity anyway. Okay, so scientists presume members of the species traveled through the natural corridor of the Levant. This is a mainstream, or the established timeline. So around at the earliest 2 million years ago, they hugged the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, and then that's how they made it into Asia. So Scardia's study, which was peer-reviewed and published in the Quaternary Science Reviews, he's saying that hominins capable of tool creation, again, hominins capable of tool creation, not necessarily Homo erectus, that can also include Homo habilis as well. So he doesn't specify which hominin, may have been on the doorstep of Asia some 500,000 years earlier. Okay, so that claim helps to explain the puzzling evolution of a hominin species found in Indonesia, as well as contentious groups of skulls found in Georgia. So, yeah, those are the skulls I was talking about in Georgia earlier in this video. And also feeds into the broader discussion of which Homo species came from Africa and which evolved outside of that continent. So, the story, I think the most accepted story is that Homo erectus left Africa here, and then they spread out into Asia, and then into the Caucasus, and then eventually the steppe and all that. And then they evolved and became other things. Same thing in Southeast Asia. That they think that they went down here, Homo erectus came down here, and then they just seeded everything, and then they eventually turned into the Hobbit people, Denisovans, etc. However, that's kind of changing now, because especially in Indonesia, because I did a video a few months ago about this mysterious, this unknown hominin that seemed to have been the precursor to Homo floresiensis and the other Hobbit people down there. So that almost rules out Homo erectus. So again, lot of controversy, a lot of obscurity, a lot of vagueness in here, but hopefully you guys can see that there's definitely some sort of human activity going on way earlier than we thought. Because who else would have made those tools? So they excavated a 30-meter high fluvial terrace, a steppe geological formation carved out by a river. The water source would have supported a variety of local wildlife and potentially humans. So they, just like any other archaeologist, they find a site that they think would have the highest probability, the most likely to have people inhabit there for a certain period of time. So that means when they spend the money to dig and do the excavation, they have, it's almost like the lottery almost, right? You're almost like gambling. They're taking the gamble that, okay, we're probably going to find something here. And then they did. The Zarka Valley is littered with artifacts. People have found more advanced tools such as hand axes and lower, younger fluvial terraces, along with fossils of mammoths and other extinct fauna. So there's a lot of stuff here. They've known that there's a lot of stuff here. So that, again, that's why they decided to excavate there. So what they found was at the very bottom of the excavation site was a layer of dark volcanic basalt, which they dated to 2.5 million years ago. So that's like the baseline. So if you think of a hole, you dig a hole, at the bottom of the hole is this volcanic basalt. So since they dated the bottom, then they have a rough estimate of how old things are within that hole. Does that make sense? Sardia and his colleagues used 3 methods to date the sediments where the tools were found above this base. They found a bunch of other stuff too, like the remnants of a mammoth, an auroch, and then they found like some other tools as well. So they used paleomagnetism to measure the alignment of minerals in relation to the Earth's periodically flipping magnetic pole. So basically, they're able to track when the magnetic poles were moving. So from there, they're able to date and see where basically where the minerals were, or the alignment of the minerals were at the time. And then they used 2 different types of radioisotopic dating methods. They used potassium argon and uranium to lead. And then from there, they triangulated the dates of all 3 methods. And they found that the earliest tools had settled into their place in that hole, in the sediment layer. So they were left there for millions of years, about 2.48 million years ago. That's a really, really early date compared to all the other stuff that I mentioned earlier, like the skulls in China, the skull in Georgia, or the bones in Georgia, and all these other tools. So these are one of the tools here. So you can see it really doesn't seem like this is a natural erosion here. This definitely looks like someone knew what they were doing. They're trying to make pointed edges. And again, these are just remnants. Who knows what we haven't found, or what they look like in their heyday. So this is basically what it comes down to, guys. Do you accept this as man-made, or is this completely natural? Because this is what's dividing the archaeological community. It is whether these are tools or not. And if they are tools, then who made them? And what could be said about those people who made them? Did they have a culture? Did they have a set of like laws, or were they just hunter-gatherers? Did they have some sort of stability, some stabilizing force that led them to cooperate and communicate like humans and try to live in harmony with nature? There's so many questions if these are actually man-made, and I tend to believe that they are. I don't see how this could be naturally occurring at all. And they found a trove of these. These aren't the only 2. They found a bunch of them, and there's probably a lot more out there. And again, the Zarka Valley is known to house all of these different artifacts. So the oldest fossil evidence for Homo erectus, this, according to this article, is 1.9 million years ago. So again, this makes it unlikely that the species made the tools found in the Zarka Valley, because obviously that's almost 600,000 years. So there's no way that they would have traveled back in time and made these or anything like that. So their hypothesis is that the tools may have been wrought by Homo habilis. Again, they're a very ancient offshoot of, or they're ancient species of Homo, and they were alive during the early Pleistocene, almost near the very beginning. And again, a lot of scientists don't think Homo habilis was capable of this sort of thing, because they were a lot more primitive. A lot of them lived in trees, and they preferred the arboreal existence. But they were capable of making stone tools. So again, I'm not sure which Homo species it is. All I know is that someone had to have been there to make those tools, and that's the focus of this video here. So again, if this is true, then this explains a few things. The possibility of hominins leaving Africa before Homo erectus, that's definitely possible. Their results fit into an emerging pattern of early stone tool sites in Africa and China. That early stone tool site was the one I was talking about in Algeria, which dates to 2.4 million years ago. So again, this means that a dispersal, if they were dispersing into Algeria and perhaps even Morocco and into Spain, then who's to say a dispersal into the Levant couldn't have happened as well? So that's one noteworthy aspect of this, of the implications of this study. And then there are other artifacts found in China, which are about 2.1 million years old. So if they found artifacts here in Jordan, then 400,000 years later, if they find them in the same ones in China, well, that follows, and that's a hint that there are people either already there or migrating there and got there and made those tools within 400,000 years, which is totally possible. So again, scientists initially hypothesized that this hominin was either pathologically dwarfed modern human, or that Homo erectus arrived in this part of Asia, settled on Flores, and then evolved into a smaller species. This is what I was talking about earlier. But this doesn't make sense to me, because if there was poor food and isolation, wouldn't they have left? Like, isn't the whole point of going to new lands finding an easier life? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me that Homo erectus would just come and then get stranded, unless he got stranded. But even then, I just feel like they would have died off. So I think the more recent explanation makes more sense, which is an unknown hominin was a common ancestor of Floresiensis and habilis, and then the pre-erectus migration out of Africa might have opened up the possibility that some of the hominin species evolved after leaving the African continent, and then eventually came to Southeast Asia and then became the Homo floresiensis. There must have been some sort of precursor there. I don't think it was directly erectus. It might have been something that was an offshoot from erectus, or even predated erectus rather, and then became floresiensis. And who knows how far back that goes. The stones, he notes, may have simply chipped as they were thrown around in the water over time. This is like one of the archaeologists who thinks the study is bunk. He thinks these are just naturally occurring. Only selecting those that showed repetitive undirectional marks that would suggest deliberate hominin shaping. Yeah, so they Scardia, he took all the tools that he found, and then any of them that he thought may have occurred naturally, he just threw out and kept the ones that he thought were undeniably human made, and he was still left with a giant pile of them. So I don't know, the jury's still out, I suppose, until they find bones right next to the site. I guess that's pretty much the only way. So again, the study adds fuel to a larger discussion about in the field over the paradigm of Africa being the cradle of all Homo species. Again, some people think out of Australia was another one. Scardia and his colleagues suspect that pre-Homo erectus hominin could have traveled to Asia and there evolved into a new species such as Floresiensis and Denisovans and stuff. So again, Scardia thinks that in light of all this, there is probably a hominin much older than erectus that already got to Asia first. And he likely came from Africa. So I don't know if this fits in with the out of Australia theory, because again, if it was out of Australia, why would they all be in Jordan? Why would they find this in Jordan? But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some sort of explanation for that, or maybe it was just happening concurrently and the out of Australia happened way earlier than even this. The team points to the finding of Homo habilis-like skulls in the Caucasus Mountains 1.8 million years ago as evidence for this migration and subsequent evolution. That's why they think habilis came out first, because the bones that they found, they think that it resembles habilis. But then there are other people who think it's no way, it's Homo ergaster, which is a close relative of erectus. So insofar as the bones, like as far as like what they're classified as, I'm not too concerned with that. Again, I'm just concerned with there are smart people 2.5 million years ago making tools and spreading across continents. That to me alone is worth talking about. And all the other stuff I feel like will get cleared up in time as long as we keep finding more and more evidence. And also if the technology continues to improve and we're able to find more clever ways of dating things. But either way, let me know what you guys think about this. Keep it clean in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys later.